My life has been defined by exile. When I was 2.5, I was exiled from Argentina. I went to the States, and I became a little American boy for 10 years. And then I was exiled when my father had to leave the States and go to Chile. And then many years later, I was exiled from Chile when there was a coup against Salvador Allende, the democratically elected president. And then when I spent 17 years in exile and tried to go back, I went back and found, to my surprise, after trying and trying to go back to Chile, that in fact I couldn't stay there. That didn't fit into the country. The country had changed too much. My dreams of the country had changed too much. That I had changed too much. So the last of all the things that I wrote about is a book called Feeding on Dreams, which tells basically the story of these exiles. It says, and looks at my life and says, the young man who left Chile as an ardent revolutionary turned into a very different sort of writer when he came back. He was something else. A man who was full of anger and rage and the idea of breaking with the enemy and killing the enemy or destroying the enemy, came back ready for reconciliation. A man who thought that he should not tell the truth because it might hurt the political part that he was on, ended up being a man who was willing to tell the truth no matter what happened. So these transformations, this going through a process of exile changing me, scouring me, making me the voice that you now hear, that I'm speaking with, it's almost as though I'm trying to tell the story of how that voice came to be. And I do so by a literary means. I take the diaries of my return to Chile in 1990, when I came back for good, and little snippets of those diaries are interspersed with long meditations about the way in which I'm going to go back to Chile. So it tells the whole story. So in one sequence, I'm going back, I want to go back, I can't wait to go back. In the other sequence, I'm already back, and the country is already disappointing me. And this, I think, allows for dialectic. It allows for the reader to jump with me, to experience with me what it is to go back and forth in my voyages, my own journeys. And that's fundamentally what the book is about. It's about how I set out in one direction and ended up taking a different direction. And it was always history. It was always history which was making me go in the different direction than the one I was in. Well, what happens is that they put you in a situation where you can't go home. Not only can't you go home, but you have to speak about those terrible things happening back home. So for instance, one of the reasons why I wanted to get rid of Pinochet, General Pinochet, is so that I would be free not to have to write about General Pinochet. If you get rid of the dictator, right, you don't have to speak about him anymore. It's almost like colonialism in the case of India. I mean, of course, you want to get rid of the colonizer because you want to be free and independent. But also, you really would like not to have to write about colonization all the time, right? You'd like to be able to write about other things, with colonization as one of the other things that you've got there. So I think, that exile formed me. What it really did and was really important was it gave me a sense that distance is important. That I need distance in order to write. I need to be able to be a bit far away to be able to take a perspective, to be able to tell the truth. And I think that I grew in love with distance. It's a danger as well. It can be very dangerous to grow away from your immediate roots, your homeland, right? On the other hand, perhaps I can write more about my homeland, more satirical work, more work about the depths of the country. I can see things. I can dare, like I did in Death and the Maiden, to write about the transgressive things that are happening in Chile. I can write about it because I am not going to be a person who is captive of the little tiny squabbles of my own country. And so, exile is both something that destroys you and creates you. It's a curse and it's a blessing. The problem is, how do you turn the curse into a blessing? 3 or 4 years after the coup, after the military takeover of Chile, there was the terrible phenomenon of the disappeared. People who were taken from their homes and taken forcibly, but they were neither alive nor were they dead. they were simply put away. And you didn't know if they were living, if they were dead, if they were being tortured, if they would come home, and they didn't come home. And not one body had appeared. And many of my colleagues in Chile and outside were writing denunciations of the disappeared. Instead of that, I wrote a novel called Widows. In the novel called Widows, I create a country, it's Greece, where an old woman sits by the river and bodies begin to come up. She's lost her father, her husband, and 3 sons. All the men in the family have been kidnapped. She takes the first body. She says, "This is my father," but she can't recognize it. "I'm going to bury him." The military kidnap the body and bury it themselves. Another body comes. She says, "This is my husband." The military take it away. So 6 months after I wrote that novel, the first bodies begin to appear in Chile. They begin to appear in the rivers, in the mines. They begin to appear in the fields, in the ocean. So if I had waited for Chile's bodies to appear, I would have been writing realistic fiction about what was happening. Instead of which, I wrote anticipatory fiction about what would happen. And therefore, I saw more of what was going to happen in my country than the people who were inside the country, seeing that there were no bodies. So there's no bodies, we can't invent bodies. No, I said there are going to be bodies. They come from our imagination. We will not forget them. We will not forgive what is happening. We will rescue them from death. We will. We will create an Antigona for our times, right? We will bury the bodies. This is an example of how, from a distance, I could write a novel about Greece, which was about Chile. And my idea was, of course, to have it brought into Chile as if it were a novel about Greece by a Danish author, so that I could fool the authorities, you know. But finally that didn't happen. But so it was a bit with the idea that I can say things. And now, for instance, I wrote a novel called The Nanny and the Iceberg, you know. And it's a satirical novel about the iceberg that the Chileans take to Sevilla. It's a detective story. It's satirical about everything, the left, the right, the center. We say a word, no dejé títere con cabeza, means I cut off all the heads of all the puppets. All the puppets were headless, you know. And I could never have written that in Chile because I laugh at everybody. And when you laugh at people, that's much more dangerous. If you laugh at people, they're going to shoot you. If you cry, then they may not shoot you, you know, if you're tragic. But people can't stand you bringing them up to ridicule. So now that novel has been published, I think, in 20 languages, you know, and everybody around the world can laugh at these things because the South Africans think it's about South Africa. Indians probably would think it's about them, because I'm sure that you would, if you had an iceberg, you would take it to the World's Trade Fair to show how cool you are and how different you are, how modern you are, you know, how modern you are. So I read about how modern India is, you know, and I say that's very interesting, you know, but go tell it to the ox cart person who's working on the street, you know, and has no idea about these things. So I like these perspectives, and this distance is what helps me. I could never have written that in Chile, because not only would they have killed me, but I would have felt ashamed to laugh at the milkman because he's bringing me my milk every day, you know? Whereas this way, I can laugh at him from far away because my milk, I buy it at the supermarket in the USA. Yes, I found that I had come back to a Chile where, in order for us to have peace with the military and with those who own the media, who own the big companies, who own the land, to have peace between the people and the owners of Chile and those who had done these terrible things to us, we needed to not talk about these things. We needed a pact of silence in some sense. And you know what? I'm not part of that pact. So I said to the president, this is your job, is to reach an agreement with the military. My job is not to reach an agreement with the military at all. I have no agreement with them. I sign nothing with them. The job of the writer is to tell the truth so it hurts you, so that it keeps you absolutely clean. It forces you to say that I'm doing something terrible, the president would say. I don't like what I'm doing. So don't tell me that you like what you're doing, that you find this wonderful. It's not wonderful. It's tragic what is happening to us. I have to tell that story, and I will tell that story, and I will not be silenced in that sense, you know. But I'm not arrogant about this, you know. I mean, it's just the wind of history which is speaking through me. I have no idea this has anything to do with me. I'm just a vehicle for the words of history.